Hare Krishna. I'm grateful to be here amongst all of you. Thank all of you for coming here today. And I'll try to speak today on the topic of the mind and how it affects us in our lives and how we can affect it positively. So I'll be speaking today and tomorrow in a series, and possibly I will continue it on Thursday also. So I'll speak from the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where there is a section called the Gita, where Krishna instructs Uddhava. And within that, there is a section called the Bhikshu Gita. So Bhikshu Gita is the song of the mendicant. So the backdrop is that there is this Brahmana who faces adversity upon adversity upon adversity. He's wealthy and prosperous and suddenly loses everything. And because he has been miserly earlier, so now people get back at him. People insult him, people insult him, mock him, and do all sorts of and humiliate him in various ways. Is it better now? Okay. So, at that time, when he is facing extreme misery, he gets the realization that these problems are primarily because of my mind. Manah param karanam mamananti samsara chakra parivartayedyaha. So he says, Manah param karan. The primary reason of my suffering is the mind. And then he analyzes various other causes of suffering. He says, okay, I'm suffering because I have a disease. I'm suffering because this person is behaving so unreasonably. He analyzes various other causes and he shows how all those causes are subordinate to the primary cause of the mind. So let's look at some verses from this section. So I'll talk on 11:23:46. Samahitam yasya manah prashantam ashnadivi kim tadattasya kakrutyam danadivi kim vadatasya krutyam asanyatam yasya mano vinashyat danadivisched aparam kimebhi. So samahitam yasya manah prashantam. For a person whose mind has become peaceful, danadivi kim vadatasya krutyam. So there are various activities which are considered to be good. Dan adibhi. There is generally, in the Vedic tradition, there are three activities which are considered to be important for people who are in the material world. There is yajna, dana and tapa. So, dana adibhi, there is dana and other activities. Kim vadatasya krutyam. What is the use of all these? What is the need of all these for one whose mind is peaceful? And for one whose mind is not peaceful, asayatam yasya mano vinashyat. For one whose mind is not peaceful, such a person is going to be doomed. And dana diviched aparam kidevi. What will dana and other things achieve? This means that the primary thing which all our practices in life are meant to achieve is control of the mind, focus of the mind. Now we often talk about our standard of living. We all, especially in today's world, want to be upwardly mobile. We want to improve our standard of living. And it's a reasonable expectation to have. Okay, if I have a smaller house, I want a bigger house. If I have a smaller car, a bigger car. We are talking about the standard of living and how to improve it. Now, there is another standard which actually determines whether we will become happy or not. Improving the standard of living alone will not make us happy. Now, what will determine our happiness is our standard of longing. Standard of longing means what is the nature of our desires. So as long as we are externally directed, then no matter how much we achieve, we will always feel that there is this I don't have, this that I don't have. And that way, we will never gain satisfaction. To illustrate this point, that most often we see others having some things and we feel that, oh, I don't have this, I don't have that, I have to get that. And if I get that, I'll become happy. So happiness seems to be out there in the things that we don't have. And yes, when we get those things, there is some pleasure. But that pleasure is very short-lived. So there's a British writer, Oscar Wilde. Nowadays, everybody wants to be very fashionable. We have the most fashionable kind of clothes. So he said, as Oscar Wilde said, that fashion is a form of ugliness so intolerable that we have to change it every 6 months. Normally, we consider fashion as something beautiful. Yes, it looks good in the eyes of the world, but only as long as that is a trendy fashion. And as soon as that goes out of fashion, then what happens? You make such old-fashioned things. And for people who are very fashion conscious, there is practically no word as hurting as old-fashioned. They have to be constantly, and then because the fashions keep changing, that which was fashionable earlier, not only doesn't stay attractive, it actually becomes ugly. It marks its own. And then it becomes a form of ugliness so intolerable that one has to change it. And this craving for things which we don't have, this ensures that we never stay satisfied. Actually, to some extent, the modern consumerist economy runs on the fuel of consumer dissatisfaction. The economy actually doesn't want us to stay satisfied. And there's nothing wrong in getting products if they are needed and if they are useful. But just getting them because they are glamorized, that is something which is something where we are controlled by others. There's a famous advertiser who later on wrote a book exposing how advertising works and how advertising manipulates people's minds. So his book was titled, "Trust Me, I Am Lying." So that was the name of his book. And the idea is that we live in a world where whatever desires we have, they are fanned and fueled by the outside culture. And not only are whatever desires we have fanned and fueled, but along with that, desires are also injected into us. And when desires are injected into us, then the more desires we have, the more dissatisfied we become. Chintam parimeyam cha pralayantam upashrita kamopabhoga parama etavat iti nishchitaha. In the Bhagavad 16th chapter, 11th verse, Krishna says that Chintam aparimeyam cha. Aparimeya is also not measurable. Chinta is anxiety. Immeasurable anxiety results for those people. Chintam aparimeyam cha pralayantam upashritaha. Pralayantam means till the moment of death, desires are simply insatiable. I want this, I want that, I want that. So there's a traditional story told in Indian circles about how the pralayanta upashita, how to the moment of death, the craving continues. There was a young man who was fairly religious, but he found his father was still very materialistic and attached. So he thought, how can I make my father a little more spiritual? So he arranged to have his father go for a pilgrimage to holy places. He thought maybe he'll meet some holy people. And when his father went and came back, when he came back, he did not come to his home. His father had a clothes shop. He did not come back home. He went straight to the shop. He was looking at all the accounts. How well are we managing the business? So the son was exasperated. He said, what is this? He says, there's no attachment coming. So he said, let me take my father to a crematorium. And if he sees, sees dead bodies, and then when he went there, what happened? He saw his father, his face fell. Oh no, what have I done? I have wasted my life. His father said, oh, I think now some wisdom has come. He's recognized his place. He asked his father, he went close to his father, and his father said that actually, alas, I wasted my life. My whole life, I was dealing in a business of clothes. And clothes, sometimes the market is there, sometimes the market is not there. Now, if I had been dealing in a business of wood, people are always dying. I would have made so much more money. So, pralayantam upashritaha. This is the moment of death. The desire. Now, there is nothing wrong in wanting money. The problem is that money is the means for living. But the materialistic propaganda makes money into the purpose of living. Money is a means for living. It is something which we need for living in this world. But life has to have some higher purpose. But then money and the things that money can buy, that is what becomes the purpose of life. And when that becomes the purpose, then it is an endless chain. It just goes on and on. There is a rat race that goes on in society. And the problem with the rat race is that even if we win the rat race, we still remain rats. Nothing changes. So, the fulfillment of desires doesn't change the nature of the desires. That means that okay, I have a particular desire, okay, I have got this phone, now the latest this phone has come now. I want to get this phone. I think, if I get this phone, I will be satisfied. Yes, if that phone is useful for functional purposes, fine, you can get it. But thinking that getting that phone will make me happy, that is not going to happen. Because the problem is not just that the charm of that phone is limited. The problem is that actually the nature of our very desire is that the desire will make us look for something out there. So now the mind often gets programmed to function in particular ways. That means, some of you can sit here also. I don't mind. The room becomes full. You can sit here perfectly fine. So, the mind is like a software, and as a software, it gets programmed. To understand what the mind is and how it plays a role here in perpetuating the nature of our desires. We can compare our existence to a computer system. In a computer system, there is the user, there is software, and there is the hardware. Similarly, our existence is three-dimensional. So there is the body, which is like the hardware. There is the mind, which is like the software. And there is soul, which is like the user. So now, the body being like the hardware is important. If my hardware, if I'm working on a computer, and if say the hard disk is damaged or the power connection is lost, power damaged, then I cannot function. So the hardware is essential. So like that, the body is essential. But if say the software is corrupted, if say my software is corrupted, and because of that there's nothing coming on my display, then just replacing the display will not remove the problem. Replacing the display will not remove the problem because the problem is of a different nature. A software problem cannot be corrected by improving the hardware. The same way, in today's society, there is a phenomenal amount of energy, creativity and intelligence for improving things at the physical level. That's like improving the hardware. And it's helpful. It's to improve the hardware. But just as improving the hardware doesn't solve software problems, Similarly, improving things physically doesn't help people mentally. Improving things physically is good, but that doesn't help people mentally. People are still in anxiety. In fact, so psychologists are talking about what they call as the anxiety epidemic. It says that we may have AIDS epidemic or we may have Ebola epidemic. We're talking about anxiety epidemic. And millions upon millions of people all over the world are afflicted by uncontrollable anxiety. At one level, anxiety is a function of living in this world where there is uncertainty. If I have to catch a flight and there's a traffic jam and I'm not sure whether I'll be able to reach the flight in time or not, that uncertainty will cause anxiety. So we can't avoid anxiety entirely in this world. But much of the anxiety that we encounter in today's world is often anxiety that is not based on realistic uncertainty. It is simply based on imagination of the mind. So for example, recently there was an article in the Guardian, and what were the greatest anxieties of 7, 8, 10-year-old children? So one boy, he said that the worst thing that can happen in the world is that Britain will leave the European Union. Now what is that got to do for an 8, 9, 10-year-old child? Another boy said, oh, what if the global warming occurs and the whole earth gets covered by water? Well, these are possible dangers, but these have got nothing to do with the day-to-day living of the children. So when we get too caught in the materialistic way of living, thinking that material things out there will make me happy, then all the things out there can also cause us anxiety. So when I think my happiness lies out there, then the loss of the threat to that source of happiness out there causes anxiety. And this direction of our consciousness, direction of our consciousness means, where am I looking for happiness? That becomes like a default software program. So a default software program means something which happens even against our will, or even without our conscious notice, without our conscious notice. So I am a writer primarily. So for proofreading my articles, I use a text-to-speech software. So after I have written the article, then I have it read out by the computer. So once I had written an article, and the article was, the soul is Satchitanand. There was a sentence in that. And the computer read it out, the soul is Saturday Chitanand. So here, what happened is, the computer's autocorrect made the correct incorrect. I had put Sat, but the computer's autocorrect made it Saturday. This is an example of a default programming. So when we do a particular thing repeatedly, say for example, if I go repeatedly to a particular website, say if I read repeatedly, which is a popular newspaper here, Gulf News, okay. So if I just type G, then over a period of time my browser or Google, as soon as I type G, it will immediately complete as Gulf News. Now I want to go somewhere else, maybe I want to read Guardian. But as soon as I type G, if I am not careful, it will become Gulf News, it will go there also. So I have to consciously go and change it. So just as in a software, default programs are set. Like that, in our mind, default programs get set. And once those default programs get set, then our mind functions in that way, irrespective of whether we want it to function that way or not. It just goes out of our control. The default program works on its own. And so when we repeatedly expose ourselves to materialistic stimuli, oh, buy this, watch this, eat this, touch this, get this, all this propaganda is bombarding us from various sides, then it infects us. It becomes like the default conditioning of our consciousness. And because of this default conditioning, whatever we do, our mind repeatedly sees what I don't have. So I may get the most expensive car, but then as soon as I'm driving, I see that car looks better than mine. Now there will be so many other people my car is better than their car. But the mind has become conditioned in a particular way that it will always look for what we don't have. And based on looking for what we don't have, it keeps us dissatisfied. And by keeping us dissatisfied like this, we never have any peace of mind. We never have any happiness. Ashantasya kutaha sukham. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that Nasti buddhira yuktasya nacha yuktasya bhavana nacha bhavitah shanti ashantasya kutaha sukham. He says, if the mind is not peaceful, there cannot be any happiness. Now, people in general, as a part of behavior in a cultural society, often put on a facade of happiness. They basically, whenever they meet and socialize, everybody acts as if they are happy. And yes, it's not that when we are in society, we all should be glum, looking miserable. It's natural that when we are meeting with people, we are courteous, we are cheerful. But sometimes this facade, it not only conceals as a matter of courtesy, but it actually deceives the world, and we try to deceive ourselves also. We think that I'm happy, everything is fine. Or what happens is I think, oh, if I just get that thing, everything will be fine. But it is that improving the hardware will not correct the software problem. So like that, if the mind is conditioned in a particular way to look for what I don't have, then no matter how much I have, still the mind will keep me dissatisfied. Now, see, dissatisfaction is not necessary for ambition. Sometimes people say that, oh, if you become satisfied, if you become spiritual, you become satisfied, then you're no longer ambitious. So no, dissatisfaction and ambition are two different things. It is not that dissatisfaction alone is necessary for ambition. Because when there is dissatisfaction, there is basic insecurity. As I am not good enough. I have to do something more, then maybe I'll become good enough. So that dissatisfaction, it just keeps us insecure, it keeps us fearful. And the whole, nowadays many people suffer from inferiority complex, or some variant of some else, they call it self-esteem complex. Now this whole idea of inferiority complex and personality disorder, this all started maybe 100-150 years ago. Prior to that, people, it's not that everybody had equal talent, people had different levels of talents, but the sheer amount of materialism and the sheer amount of portraying oneself as if one is great in order to come off successful in life, that was not required. So when the setting of the mind is not changed, so I was talking about dissatisfaction, when dissatisfaction is the basis of our ambition, then no matter what we achieve, it will not keep us satisfied. And there's something more, something more, something more, something more. And there are basically two foundations for ambition. One is dissatisfaction. The other is contribution. Now when, because of my dissatisfaction, I want to achieve this, I want to achieve that, I want to achieve that, then I will always stay insecure. But when our goal is to make a contribution, yes, okay, God has given me some talents. He has given me some ability, some resources. And whatever God-given talents I have, I'm meant to do justice to them. Develop them, express them, and make a positive contribution in this world. So when we have a spiritual vision of life, when we understand that we are parts of God, and we get our satisfaction and security from our connection with God, then there's a stability which we have internally. And with that stability, when we act in the world, then also we are positively ambitious. But that ambition doesn't come from a platform of insecurity or unworthiness. What happens in a materialistic society is that people's self-worth becomes equated with their net worth. So, how much is my salary? That's how good I am. Somebody has more salary than me, then I feel insecure. But different people are different. And we all have different talents. And yes, how much we are earning is important, but that is not the sole determiner of a person's worth at all. So when we are rooted in our spiritual understanding, the Bhakti vision of life is that what we are is God's gift to us. What we become is our gift to God. What we are is God's gift to us. We have certain talents, we have certain abilities. And then we have to work hard, we have to channel and direct our use of those abilities so that we become better human beings, so that we make positive contribution in this world. So what we become is our gift to God. And the Bhakti vision of life is that this world also belongs to God. Because this world belongs to Krishna, so the resources of this world are also meant to be used in His service. And some of the resources are my talents. The talents which I have are also given to me by God, so I have to use them. I have to use them. If I have to work hard, I will work hard. But that hard work is not driven by dissatisfaction. Because I don't have this, so I am insecure. If that is the platform on which you are working, because I don't have that, I am not happy. When I get that, I will become happy. Then that is like a software setting which is wrong. And no matter how much I achieve, the software setting will still stay the same way only. And how much I achieve, I will still be looking for what I don't have. And I will stay dissatisfied. In the Bhagavad Gita, in the 17th chapter, 16th verse, Krishna talks about austerity of the mind. He talks about austerity of the body, austerity of the speech, and austerity of the mind. And the austerity of the mind, he says, Manah prasad saumyatvam maunamatma vinigraha bhava samshuddhiriti etat tapomanasa muchyate. So he says, Manah prasad, that satisfaction, cheerfulness, satisfaction, this is an austerity of the mind. This is an interesting concept. Normally when we talk about austerity, in today's world, austerity is now a common word in political and economic circles. And then the government says we have to take austerity measures. And they will cut down some facilities, they will increase the taxes. And they say that this austerity measure we have to take because the economy is down. But the austerity, basically, in spiritual circles we talk about austerity, maybe fasting on some holy days. Austerity is the idea that it's basically a voluntary acceptance of a particular condition, even if it is uncomfortable, for a higher purpose. So we naturally want to eat, but sometimes we fast. That is austerity. Now, of course, austerity, apart from its spiritual benefits, there are other benefits also. Nowadays, many people fast because they want to lose weight, they want to look good, whatever it is. So, austerity means I want something higher, and for that I am ready to give up something lower. So it's interesting when Krishna talks about satisfaction, he's talking about it as austerity of the mind. Normally, we think of austerity as satisfaction, we think of it as a feeling that we have or we don't have. I'm feeling satisfied. I'm feeling dissatisfied. Yes, satisfaction is an emotion. But satisfaction is also a decision. Satisfaction is not just an emotion that comes upon me. Sometimes I feel satisfied, sometimes I don't feel satisfied. satisfaction is also a decision. That means it is a decision about what is going to be the focus of my attention. If I keep looking at the things which I don't have, I'll never be satisfied. Satisfaction in the decision means that I will not let my thoughts wander to the various things that I don't have. I'll focus on counting my blessings. So for example, suppose that after this program we have prasad. So there is a feast. And suppose it's a special feast where everyone has got different items in their plate. Everyone has got different items. So I have a feast, he has a feast, I have a feast, everyone has a feast. But everyone has different items. Now, instead of looking at the items in my plate and eating, I look, oh, he has got that. Oh, she has got that. Oh, they have got that. You know, okay, enjoy your feast. Why are you worrying about so when I keep looking at all the things that everyone else has got, even if I have a feast, I will be dissatisfied. Okay, I want this. Yeah, let me go into samadhi now. Let me just say, well, this feast that I have, we will enjoy the feast. So satisfaction can be a decision also. I won't look at what is there in who else's plate. I look at what I have. I'll appreciate it. So like that, all of us have gifts in our life. It's only when we start comparing our gifts with others, then we start feeling dissatisfied. But if we focus on what we have, we find that what we have is enough for our satisfaction. And actually, we are focusing on what we have, we can also increase it. But if we develop the habit of counting our blessings, then there is a possibility of satisfaction. If we don't develop this habit, no matter how much we have, there will never be satisfaction. Once I saw an advertisement of a car. There was this young man who was driving a car, and just next to him, a young, good-looking girl was standing with an adoring eyes looking at him. And in the background, there's another young man, glaring in envy, glaring at him. And the advertisement was, buy this car and enjoy the envy in your neighbor's eyes. What a pathetic standard. They're not even saying enjoy the car. They're saying enjoy the envy in your neighbor's eyes. That means if your neighbor gets a better car, then he will enjoy the envy in your eyes. Where is the enjoyment at all? That's why I started by talking about, our happiness doesn't depend on our standard of living. It depends on our standard of longing. Now, if the nature of our longings are materialistic, if you're always looking for the things which we don't have, and getting those things is the basis of our understanding of what will make me happy, then we will never become happy. So improving the standard of living is like improving the hardware. Improving the standard of longing, that is like improving the software. Improving the standard of longing means refining and elevating our own desires. So one standard of longing can be, I want to get better things than my neighbor, or my cousin, or my brother, or my relative, whatever. But that is one standard of longing. And that standard of longing will always keep us dissatisfied. Another standard of longing can be, I have been given gifts and I want to make a contribution using these gifts. This is a higher level. There is a higher level of longing. There is a longing there, but that longing doesn't stem from basic insecurity. That longing stems from a desire to share, a desire to contribute. And for elevating our longing thus, we need spiritual understanding and spiritual realization. When we practice bhakti, it's not just a cultural activity that we do because this is what our culture is all about. It's good if we do it that way, but we are actually underusing the potential of bhakti that way. So the process of Bhakti Yoga is meant to connect us with Krishna. And Krishna is the reservoir of all happiness. In the Bhagavad Gita 10th chapter, 41st verse, Krishna says that Yad yad vibhuti matsatvam shrimadurjitam evava tattadeva avagachatvam mama tejomsha sambhava. So he says that whatever is attractive, whatever is beautiful, whatever is opulent in this world, know that it is a spark of my splendor. Mama tejo amsha sambhava. It is a spark of my splendor. So for example, if I see a very attractive car, that car is attractive. The Bhakti doesn't tell us, hey, that's Maya. It's all false. Maya doesn't mean it is false. Maya, what is Maya is to think that that car itself will make me happy. That car is attractive. Yes, it is attractive. There are intelligent people, artistic people who have designed the car, and it is attractive. Some houses are very attractive. That's fine. But their attractiveness is actually like a spark. And that spark is a reflection of Krishna, who is like the sun. Or to give another example, the capacity of those objects to give us pleasure is like the capacity of a drop of water to quench thirst. Whereas Krishna is like the ocean of water. The drop cannot quench thirst, but the ocean can quench it. In the Mukundamala Stotra, Pulashekar Maharaj says that Hari Sarasi Vigahaya Piya Tejo Jalaugham Bhavamaru Parikhinnaha Klesham Adyatejami. So he says that Hari Sarasi, Lord Hari is like a lake, a big lake filled with cool, clear water. Vigahaya Piya Tejo Jalaugham. I'll dive into this lake and drink from the lake. What is the water in the lake? It is Jal Augham, it is his glories. So understand the beauty, the greatness, the sweetness of Krishna. That is like drinking the water. And thus what will happen? Bhava Maru Parikhinnaha Klesham Adyatejami. Bhava Maru, this material existence is like a desert. And in this desert, I have been searching for water for so long. Parikhinnaha. I become dejected, klesha, I have only got distress in this search. Adyatajami, I will no longer go in the desert looking for mirages. I will focus on dive into the nectar of Hari's glories and thereby quench my thirst fully and forever. So the process of bhakti actually gives us higher happiness by connecting us with Krishna. And when that higher happiness is experienced, prashantam, as mentioned in this verse, that we become peaceful. And then when we're peaceful internally, whatever we do externally, we'll be able to do it more effectively. We'll get more satisfaction through what we are doing. If our satisfaction depends only on, oh, I have to achieve this. If I don't achieve it, I have no satisfaction. If I achieve it, I have satisfaction till someone else achieves something better than me. So actually there cannot be satisfaction. But when our intention is contribution, when we have got satisfaction and security by our inner connection with Krishna, then our intention is contribution. Then when we work in life, whatever we do, that will simply increase our satisfaction. We'll be able to contribute more effectively. So dana, adibhi, even our religious activities. This change, we made, as I said, that bhakti is not just a cultural activity. When we do it simply as a cultural activity, it is good. There is some connection with Krishna and that leads to purification. But it's a very gradual purification. So when we understand bhakti is meant to be a transformational activity, it is meant to change the settings of the software of my mind. It means it is meant to direct my mind's search for happiness from the world to Krishna. Then, when there is a transformation like that, then we are tapping the potential of bhakti. And the Bhagavad Gita tells us that for a person who becomes connected with Krishna. Yam labdva cha param labham manyate nadikam gata yasmin tona dukkena guruna vicharyate. That young, having attained this, na cha param labham manyate, there's nothing more to get here. One gets the highest satisfaction by connection with Krishna. And the highest satisfaction is yasmin tona dukkena guruna vicharyate. Even if great misery comes, one is able to tolerate it because one has got so much more. One has got something which will never be lost, which is our own eternally. So on the other hand, the more we achieve materially, the more it actually subjects us to insecurity and anxiety because it may go away anytime. Nothing in the material world is enduring. But Krishna and our relationship with Krishna is enduring. When we focus on cultivating that relationship with Krishna by diligently practicing bhakti, then that is an achievement which lasts forever with us. And having the security of the inner connection with Krishna, we can contribute externally also in this world. So I'll summarize and we can have questions. We started by speaking about the Bhikshu Gita, where he's talking about how the mind is what is to be pacified. The mind is not pacified, then what is the use of religious activities? And if the mind is pacified, what is the need for religious activities? Any activity, even good activity like religious activities. So I talked about how everybody believes that improving their standard of living will make them happy. But what is more important is improving our standard of longing. And in that connection I explained that we are all always longing for things. Our mind itself has a setting by which it looks for the things it doesn't have and craves for those things. And that materialistic setting of the mind is further aggravated by the corporate controlled media in today's world, which through advertisements it fuels whatever desires are there and it injects other desires also. So fashion is a form of ugliness, so intolerable that you have to change it every 6 months. And if we think that by getting the things out there I'll become happy, the problem is even if I get those things, still the mind's habit of looking outwards has not changed. In fact, that has become reinforced by my pursuing that habit. And then again it will look for something outside. Again it will look for something outside, and this way we will stay dissatisfied. People may put on a facade, oh that I'm happy, I'm successful. But internally, they're actually deceiving themselves. Ashantasya pata sukham. So when the mind is peaceful, where is the question of, not peaceful, where is the question of happiness? I talked about how there is anxiety epidemic even in the Western world, where there's a lot of prosperity. Why is that? Because the mind setting is wrong. People are always looking for materialistic things out there, and no matter how much they have, they cannot be satisfied. Chintam aparimariyam cha pralayantam apasha. Till the moment of death. I talk about the story of this elderly man who, on seeing a crematorium, instead of getting realization about renunciation, was lamenting that I didn't have get into wood business. So that setting doesn't change. Even when one sees death in the eye, still that setting doesn't change. So what is the setting? I discussed about how the body is like the hardware, the mind is like the software, the soul is the user. And today's society works phenomenally hard for improving the hardware, for providing more and more physical comforts. It's good, but that is not going to solve software problems. Now, improving things physically won't improve the state of our mind mentally. It won't, because that setting, that's a different setting entirely. And I discussed about the default setting of the mind, how Satchitananda becomes Saturday Chitananda, or Astana type G, I may go to Gulf News. Even if I want to go to some other side. So like that, our mind has got a default setting. And if we want to become happy, we need to change the default setting. Dr. Bhagavad Krishna says that satisfaction is not just an emotion, it is a decision. If all of us have peace, rather than looking at what peace others have, we can look at what I have and count my blessings. And for having ambition, we don't need dissatisfaction. When the ambition comes from dissatisfaction, even the achievement of ambition will not bring satisfaction, because that setting will be wrong. So enjoy the envy in your neighbor's eyes. That is setting that will never lead to happiness, because we are dependent on something external which is not in our control. So we can have ambition which is founded not on dissatisfaction but on contribution. The Bhakti Yoga tells us that what we have is God's gift to us. What we become is our gift to God. And Bhakti gives us an inner connection with Krishna. And that inner connection, we understand that Krishna is there, Krishna is in control, Krishna loves me. And Krishna will take care of me. That brings security and stability. And then with that foundation of security and stability, when we function in the world, whatever we do, we'll be able to do it more effectively. And we won't depend on its success for our happiness. And whatever is attractive in this world, that is a spark of Krishna's splendor. So it can give us some pleasure, and when we connect with Krishna, that will give us, it's like connecting with the ocean of happiness. It will give us far, far greater pleasure. So Bhakti is not just a cultural activity. It means meant to be a transformational activity. Bhakti, by giving us experience of Krishna, changes the default setting of our search for happiness. Instead of looking outwards at the world, we look upwards to Krishna. And when our happiness comes from connection with Krishna, then whatever we do in the world, we don't depend on it for happiness, rather we contribute positively in our life. And this brings this connection with Krishna and a life of contribution to Krishna in that mood of service and sharing, that brings the highest satisfaction. And that gives us the inner stability to even tolerate distress. Whereas material accumulations, when there is a loss, the more we achieve, the more there is the fear of losing, and the more is the grief that we lose. But once we get a connection with Krishna, that is never lost. That is the enduring gain towards which we can work while also contributing and gaining in this world. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare
So any questions? Say we satisfy materially and focus on inner growth, inner improvement, because that decision doesn't sustain. As soon as we go out in the materialistic world, then we tend to forget these resolutions. Yes, forgetfulness, we should see it not as something unnatural. It is something which is a natural result of the dissipation of energy. That means, when I eat food, I feel energetic. But after a few hours, naturally my energy will go, because the energy has been used. And then what do? I take food again. So, like that, when we talk about a decision, the decision is basically intention of the mind, an inner intention. This is how I'm going to do. But it needs sustenance. And for that sustenance, we need energy. So when we associate with devotees, we hear some wisdom, then we feel, yes, this is what I want to do. So that what we have heard is the energy for maintaining that. But after some time, that energy is going to get exhausted. So that we shouldn't expect that once I make a decision, it's going to stay forever. Why shouldn't we expect that? Again, that is because the patterns of the mind are also real things. So for example, we use the word inclination. Now I have an inclination for this thing, or I don't have an inclination for that thing. Now when we mean that I have an inclination for something, that means that I like that. I naturally go toward that, I naturally think about that. So to understand this further, we can consider, say, inclination of a floor. Sometimes in a bathroom, if the sink is on one side, the floor is slightly inclined on that side, towards that side. Now, if say we have had to change some design, or maybe that sink is choked and we have created some sink elsewhere. Now just because I have created a sink there, the water is not going to flow in that direction. If the floor is inclined this way, and if I want the water to go in that direction, each time I will have to push the water in that direction. Each time I have to push the water in that direction. And if I want the sink to be there only, and I want the water to go naturally, then just my intention, I want to think that water should go there, is not going to work. And I have to restructure the flooring. Only when I change the inclination of the flooring, then the water will go there naturally. So like that, our mind has developed certain inclinations. And inclination means the thoughts will naturally go in a particular direction. So by association, like we make some positive resolutions, then we are trying to get the water to flow against the inclination rate. And it's going to be difficult. So it requires energy. And as soon as we stop applying the energy, the water again starts flowing in the opposite direction. So now, this is not unexpected. First of all, we expect that just one intention is going to stay lifelong. It's not going to work. We have to reinforce that decision. And so if we hear something, then maybe we can note and revisit that. Or basically the point is we have to associate regularly, hear regularly. I guess as we get exposed repeatedly to materialistic things, we have to periodically expose ourselves to spirituality, spiritual circles, spiritual wisdom. Then that will give us the energy to keep pushing the water upwards against the direction of the inclination. But over a period of time, if we keep practicing bhakti, what happens is when we keep repeatedly directing the mind in a particular direction, and that changes the inclination of the mental flow. If we keep doing something again and again and again, gradually that becomes ingrained within us. But that becomes like the change of the default setting. So that is what purification is about. So there is basically a 3-step. First is the conviction of the intelligence. Shanai Shanai Ruparme Buddha Buddha Atma Samstha Manah Krutvana Kinchita Pichinte. In 6.25 Krishna says Buddha Dhuti Gruhitaya. We have to focus the mind. How do we do that? With intelligence sustained by conviction. So first, when you start practicing bhakti, there is the intelligence that is very important. Jiva Goswami in his Sandarbhas states that for the pure devotees, for those devotees who are already pure, it is their priti that keeps them in bhakti. They love Krishna, so they actually practice bhakti. But that is for the siddhas. For us, sadhakas, it is our buddhi that will keep us in bhakti. We need to have our buddhi. So as we become more and more attracted to Krishna, our priti will develop and then we'll actually be attracted. But till then, our buddhi has to be alert. So we have to keep hearing regularly. So first step is the conviction of the intelligence. Second is the practice of bhakti. And then the third is the purification of the mind. So there's a 3-step process. So when we say that our intention doesn't stay, that means what is happening is the intellectual conviction which we got, that is going dissipated. So the intelligence, we could say, is like the energy to push the water up again and again. Now, if I feel de-energized, I have to eat, and then again I come and push. So the pushing is acting at the level of the intelligence. But practicing of bhakti itself is like changing the tilt of the floor, reconstructing the floor. So although when we do bhakti on a daily basis, it may seem to be simply like a mechanical activity. The mind is going, again I'm bringing it back to Krishna. My mind is going, I'm bringing it back to Krishna. But this is not just a mechanical activity, this mechanical is also transformational. Because in bringing the mind back to Krishna, the mind is getting some connection with Krishna, some exposure to Krishna. And over a period of time, the mind will realize, I get so excited about this and that and that. But the pleasure in that is not all that great. Actually in Krishna there is greater happiness. When the mind gets it, then it's like the floral inclination has changed. So till then, we have to keep pushing the water, and it's like if you keep pushing the water, gradually that itself helps in changing the inclination. But to get the conviction to keep pushing the water, we have to keep hearing regularly. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hare Krishna.
So how can we focus so that the bad desires don't come, and the good desires come stronger? Yes. Basically, there are 2 things. One is triggers, and the other is choices. I'll explain what I mean by triggers and choices. All of us have certain triggers for our desires. Let me say if somebody is alcoholic, and they may be a recovering alcoholic. They want to give up alcohol. But if they are going around, they see a bar which they have frequented earlier. It's a trigger. It's a trigger. Obviously the desire will come. So now sometimes the triggers can come from anywhere. But quite often we know certain things are triggers for us. So if I know that certain things are my triggers, I minimize my exposure to those triggers. We have to go out of the way. So for example, if alcoholics are told, I'm working on a book on spirituality and de-addiction. So they study a little bit about how alcoholics are to work. If say this is their office, this is their home, and they're recovering, they want to give up alcohol. But along the way there is a bar. And they have been going to that bar. So now, actually, if they see that bar, it is they are exposing themselves to a trigger. And they make themselves in a vulnerable position. So they told, if you find that a trigger agitates too much, then just put a little bit effort and go from some other way. Avoid it physically. Like there's alcoholism, there's another form of addiction which is very common. It is called a shopaholism. Shopaholism means, you just keep shopping. Shop till you drop. Very nice, people shop things, and then especially people have maybe, basements. Where they have some places where it's filled with products which they've never used also. And now, some people are just compulsive. When they go into a shop, they go planning to get 10 things and they come out with 50 things. So now, when this happens, some people are shopaholics. It just they spend their money unnecessarily on things which they don't need, which they don't actually want also. So then they are told you have to take some practical ways. So for example, if you're going to a shop where now we cannot avoid shopping, you have to shop. So what they are told is, maybe don't go with your credit card. Just go with cash. So the cash is finite. And what happens, even if you see I want to buy something, I cannot act on it immediately. Okay, I have to go back home, get a credit card. Or you have a credit card with a limited balance or whatever. So basically, there are some physical measures that need to be taken. Now, I just give these two examples. All of us can find out what is our trigger and try to minimize exposure to that trigger. And then once we do that, that prevents us from getting further agitation. And secondly is with respect to our choices. That means we shouldn't think that just because a desire has come inside me, that means it is my desire or I have to act on that desire. What I mean by this is that, I suppose somebody is dieting. They say, okay, I'll not eat this, I'll not eat that. Now, if somebody else comes and says, I made this sweet, please take this sweet. No, I'm dieting, I won't take it. It's like that. But when that same desire comes and says, why don't I take this sweet? Then, look, nobody's looking. I go and take the sweet. So what has happened? And after they take the sweet, hey, why did I take that? I had planned not to take it. So what has happened? Then the same desire, if somebody else proposes, we'll say no. But the desire comes inside us, we unwittingly think this is my desire and accept it as our desire and act on it. But if you understand that everything inside me is not me, that means everything inside me is not me. All the desires that are inside me, they are not necessarily my desires. For example, say if I am surfing on the net or I am reading some article on some website, and quite often, if I am reading one newspaper, one article on one news site, sometimes some other pop-up will come up, or some other links might be there. Now, just because that link is there or it is popped up, that doesn't mean I have to click it and I have to read that. I went to read one particular article, but something might just come up. And some programs can be designed in such a way that they normally, if there is some pop-up which comes up, you have to click on it to go there. But sometimes they make it in such a way that you have to click no to prevent going there. It just pops up and the default setting is yes. So till now, thankfully there's no technology like this. But imagine if you are reading an article and there are a dozen links on the side. And suppose there was some technology which could detect where our eyes are. So as soon as we look at that link opens up. Then we would get lost. We would just get endlessly entangled. So like that, what happens is just because the link is there doesn't mean I have to click on it. So similarly, just because a desire is there inside me, that doesn't mean I have to act on it. A desire is like a link. But if you understand this point that the mind has some default settings, so by which some desires will come. But even if the desires are coming in the mind, doesn't mean I have to act on them. So one is we avoid the triggers by which the desires don't come into us from outer sources. And second is, even if they come from inside, from some past memories or whatever, then we understand that just because it is inside me doesn't mean I have to act on it. These are from the point of view of avoiding negative desires. But more important than that is actually cultivating positive desires. So, now ultimately, we cannot drive out any desire from our consciousness. I tell you, please don't think of a pink monkey. You may never have thought of a pink monkey, now you think of a pink monkey. So sometimes if you get too caught up with, I will not do this, I will not do this, I will not do this. Just think, I will not do this, I will not do this, I will not do this. The mind is so subtle, it will just remove the not from the sentence. I will do this. So our focus always has to be on the positive, not the negative. And that's why, again, with respect to Bhakti, also same principles apply. We can find out what are our triggers in Bhakti. That means if we find that associating with some devotee inspires us a lot, or hearing some devotee's classes really energizes us. All of us can have different triggers. Some of us may like deity worship. So it may be taking darshan of a particular very beautifully dressed deity. That may trigger devotional desires within us. Some of us may like to like kirtan. So we hear some Hare Krishna doing some bhajan. That triggers devotional desires within us. So now these are triggers which we need to consciously expose ourselves to more and more. The material triggers, we need to avoid exposing. But the devotional triggers, we consciously choose to expose. And when we expose ourselves thus, then we will get devotional desires more and more. And internally, it is good to make some commitments for doing some things. So, whenever I make a commitment, I will not do this. That no commitment is actually, it's painful. Because whenever we say, I will not do this, our mind immediately associates that with the deprivation. Hey, I'm not going to get this. But if we make a yes commitment, we do something and we fill our consciousness with that, then that yes commitment will enable us to connect with Krishna. That will purify us. So in general, by identifying our triggers, what material triggers, avoiding those triggers. By recognizing that just the desires within the mind are there, I don't have to act on them. They are like links. They will appear, but I don't have to click on them. And by identifying our spiritual triggers, exposing ourselves to those triggers more and more, and internalizing our commitments. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. By all this, we can actually transform our consciousness so that it becomes less material and more spiritual. Okay? Thank you. Very good.
The triggers are also a part of anxiety because I'm anxiety and I know that trigger is helping me to achieve that something. So isn't that motivating me to do something?
Okay. Can the trigger cause anxiety, but that anxiety can be positive because it may inspire me to achieve something. Yeah. Now here, there's a difference between chronic anxiety and circumstantial anxiety. That means, we can't make avoiding anxiety the primary goal of our life. We all have to do some things, and to some extent we can say every responsibility brings anxiety with it. And we can't, if a mother is taking care of the child and the child is gone to school or somewhere, not yet come back on time, mother will naturally be anxious. And that anxiety is a part of the responsibility. So to some extent, responsibility and anxiety are intricately connected. And our goal is not simply to have an anxiety-free life. What we are talking about is unnecessary anxiety. Now, when anxiety comes up because of goals which have been foisted upon us by the culture around us, that is undesirable. So, as I said, that if we have certain talents and we want to achieve something based on those talents, that is a purposeful choice we have made. This is what I'm going to pursue. But quite often, if you look at our anxieties, they are often about desires which are not really important for others. Oh, they got this, they got that. Okay, they got it. What's so great about it? How does it make a big difference? So certainly, as enterprising individuals, we will have our ambitions. But the point is, our ambitions should be chosen ambitions. They should not be desires which are foisted upon us and which we have unconsciously accepted, unwittingly accepted, because those desires are what are glamorized in society. So, in the process of bhakti, our primary thing is neither attachment nor detachment. It is commitment. Attachment, detachment and commitment. Attachment means, I want this, I want this, I want this. Detachment means I don't care about it, I don't care about it. But commitment means, I am going to contribute to this. So commitment will also cause anxiety. But that is a conscious chosen anxiety. It's like sometimes when we lift weights, then lifting weights can improve our muscles. So that choosing to lift weights as an exercise for building our body, that is helpful. But for no reason I'm just carrying a weight. Or I'm just sitting here and somebody's put a weight on my head and I don't even notice also. I wonder why my neck is raining. So we lift weight for improving exercise, that is good. But unwittingly just carrying weight when there is no reason to carry weight, that is undesirable. That is not an exercise. That is simply an exertion. So when we are not vigilant in choosing the kind of desires that are present in our mind, then we quote unnecessary anxiety. Whereas when we have certain purposeful choices which we have made, certain responsibilities, certain commitments, the anxieties that are there in them, they are an actual part of living. And often they help us to grow, they help us to become committed, they help us to become absorbed. So, I write articles on the Gita every day. So one article I wrote, be not tense, be intense. So we don't have to be tense, worried, anxious, but we do want to be intense. And one primary difference between being tense and being intense is, when we are tense, we are focusing on the things that are not in my control. Oh, that will go wrong, that will go wrong, that will go wrong. The same situation, it can actually cause anxiety or it can bring intensity. The difference is, what is my focus? Say, if tomorrow I have an interview, and I start thinking, what if they ask some questions I can't answer? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if that happens? So that just make me a nervous wreck in a few minutes. On the other hand, I think, okay, tomorrow I have an interview. No, I have 12 hours now. Let me do all that I can to prepare in this 12 hours. So in every situation that we are in, we can look at the things that are not in our control and become filled with anxiety. Or we can look at what is in our control and get intensity. So that way, we can be purposeful and be intense, not tense. Okay? Any other questions?
Just now you said that in spiritual life we don't talk about attachment or detachment, but we talk about commitment. Can you elaborate a little?
Okay. So in spiritual life,
Obviously, we are talking about anxiety.
yeah.
This anxiety, it's imposed anxiety we are talking about. But there is some real in the sense for as householders, recently in the Gulf, it is because of the oil prices fluctuation, so many people are about to lose jobs or they have already lost jobs. And this has created a lot of anxiety in the minds, even in devotees. So we have not yet reached the stage of Yatla Dvaja, so how to see it and how to deal with this kind of anxiety. So really we have to take care of the family, children on the
That's true. Which cause anxiety, the practical problems, say because of the economic recession, there's fear of losing jobs. So how do we deal with this anxiety? Yes. See, real problems need real solutions. The spiritual is never the substitute for the material. The spiritual is the complement for the material. What I mean by this is, the spiritual is the complement, not the substitute for the material. See, when Arjuna fought the Kurukshetra war, before that he heard the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna won the Kurukshetra war not just by the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita. He won the Kurukshetra war by the knowledge of archery, which he had learned throughout his life. So it was not that the Bhagavad Gita knowledge enabled him to fight the war alone. That guided him. So, for functioning in the material world, we need material skills. We need to take care of the material responsibilities. So not that Arjuna just was chanting Hare Krishna and the arrows were shooting. He was consciously fighting. He was consciously aiming and he was planning and he had practiced lifelong. So it's not that, spiritual is not a substitute for the material. So material problems need to be dealt with materially. Krishna can miraculously intervene and Krishna can remove material problems in miraculous ways. But that is not what a devotee expects all the time. You know, Arjuna, when he took the vow to kill Jayadratha, all day he was trying to reach Jayadratha. And eventually, when he just couldn't reach it, that time Krishna exhibited a miracle. But Arjuna kept trying. So, we have to understand that at the material level, there can be problems. And we have to do the practical things to deal with the problems. So, if there is some economic downturn because of which there's anxiety, then we have to first of all be materially intelligent to do what it takes. That means, say maybe we are saving money or we are having a good career profile by which we can get another job. We basically materially we have to be vigilant for these things. We cannot be materially neglectful in the name of spirituality. So the material has to be dealt with at material terms. Now, if I have got a fracture, chanting Hare Krishna may enable me to tolerate the pain of the fracture. But chanting Hare Krishna is not going to join the bones. So for that I have to go to a doctor. So material things, material problems need material solutions. So the spiritual guides us so that we work in the material world in a purposeful way. We work in the material world with the ultimate spiritual purpose. Having said that, we need to be materially intelligent also to deal with such situations. Our spirituality can help us in separating the imaginary from the real. That means that there are, in any situation that I'm in, there are real problems and there are imagined problems. So, there is a difference between preparing for the future and worrying about the future. The primary difference is who is in control. When I'm preparing for the future, I consciously control my mind and direct it towards the future. If this happens, I can do this. 1, 2, 3. If this happens, I can do this. 1, 2, 3. Like that we plan. And when we are in control and we are directing our thoughts, then that preparing for the future actually makes us feel more confident. Yes, I can deal with this. I can deal with this. It's not what I want. It's not pleasant, but I can deal with it. But when we are worrying about the future, we are not in control. The mind is in control. Basically, the mind shows us a free horror movie. And in this free horror movie, we are not the spectator, we are the victims. You know? Hey, there's a mindset saying, the economy is going down, you'll lose your job. If you lose your job, then what if you don't get any other job? What if you don't get any other job, then I'll not be able to pay the mortgage of my house. If I can't pay the mortgage of my house, then I'll be evicted from my house. All the neighbors will come and see I've been evicted. And I'll be on the streets. Oh no, I'll be on the streets, homeless. Well, I'm sitting in an AC room right now. I'm getting paranoid about being on the streets. See, there are possibilities and there are probabilities. Possibility, actually anything is possible. And if we start worrying about possibilities, we'll be forever paralyzed. Like if I'm going to worry about possibilities, right now this roof may cave in on my head. It's possible. But is it probable? No. I mean, the house is well constructed, it is recently new, it is reliable, then it's not probable. So what happens is, when we are in tamoguna or rajoguna, the mind takes control. And the mind goes over to all the most frightening possibilities. And it paralyzes us. So we have to explore probabilities. Okay, this can happen, I can do this. So generally, if we find ourselves too overwhelmed by anxiety, on one side we have to materially prepare for it. But on the other side, by practicing bhakti, we come more to the mode of goodness. And by coming to the mode of goodness, we can actually observe, we have the intelligence to differentiate between possibilities and probabilities. And when we just go, let the mind take over this possibility, that possibility, that's like watching a horror movie, just overwhelmed. But looking at probability, will this happen, how we are dealing with it. So that way we can become more prepared. I wrote an article recently, worry is the interest we pay on loans we haven't yet taken. The problem has not yet come only, but I am worrying about the problem and I am getting paralyzed and I am actually disempowering myself from dealing with the practical right now. So the disempowering that we are happening, that is like paying the interest, because the time, energy is all going away now. So if you look at most of our worries, very few of them actually materialize. So it's possible that things can go wrong, but we can, by being in the mode of goodness, we can plan and prepare realistically. It's not that being spiritual, so to summarize two parts is, it's not that being spiritual means being apathetic about material things. Material problems require material measures, and we have to prepare materially for it. But while preparing materially, our spirituality can situate us in more goodness so that we don't worry about unrealistic possibilities, but calmly and intelligently prepare for realistic probabilities. Does that answer the question? Thank you very much. So, shall we stop? Thank you very much. Prabhupada ki